By the end of this video, you'll have some clear access around how you can be vulnerable and transparent and thus more connected emotionally and attuned to your child, regardless of the struggle that they're going through. Okay, so let me start with a story. So back in 2001, I started working with young people. I was probably 23 or something like that. And I was out of college and didn't really know what I was going to do with my life or to work. And I just moved to Oregon. And I got hired by this company that was desperate to have people working with their young people. It was a wilderness program, and their kids went out there for about 2 to 3 months or so, lived in the woods. And I was like, that's cool. I'd like to backpack, and hanging with kids seems fine. And I got to tell you, I sucked at my job. I was terrible. I didn't know how to connect with these young people. And interestingly, I didn't really know how to connect with people, nonetheless, myself. And I would try to connect by controlling, by giving them advice, by telling them what to do, by being kind of in control. I mean, it's embarrassing to actually say it out loud with you, but it was ineffective. Let's just say that. And it was how I was taught at that program. It's how I had been taught by society in terms of like what it was to be a man, from my own father, my own parents. No one really taught me how to connect or be vulnerable with people. Nonetheless, like young people who were struggling, who didn't know how to connect with themselves, right? So for about 6 months, I was bad. I mean, I gave advice, I kept trying to connect, and they just didn't really care. I mean, I was this guy, they didn't want to be there anyway, and I was this guy that didn't really give them any good reason to open up. They did kind of eventually, because the whole system kind of worked in a way, and they got connected to their own hearts. I don't think it was really due to me, to be honest, for those first 6 months. And I remember one night around a fire in the rain, late at night, and I was leading a group therapy session. And I was sharing, and something happened because everybody looked up at me, and my supervisor looked over and he goes, "Nice job, Jay." And I don't remember what I said, but I remember the experience of being like, wow, I made an impact. And I realized it was because I was vulnerable. Again, it was like 20 some years ago at this point, and I have no idea what I said. But I remember that moment of being open and transparent, and it was edgy for me, to share about myself in a way that I wasn't really comfortable doing, but that was effective. Now, I got kind of addicted to it in a way, like addicted to having impact, to having influence, and how I felt when I was vulnerable and how I felt when I was connected to these young people. And over those next 20 years, it's been, 25 years since then, I've molded myself into someone who can have influence with young people by being transparent and by being vulnerable, while at the same time not sacrificing my power as a caregiver, as a therapist, as an authority figure, all of those kind of roles that I play when I'm working with young people, right? And so the same can be true for you as a parent. I really encourage you to look at how the ideas or the beliefs or the concepts that you have around how you are not allowed to tell your kids about yourself. There's one caveat to this. It's important, and I'll just talk about this for a minute and come back to this vulnerability as power piece. If you are so vulnerable such that most of the time you expect your kids to be responsible for your emotional well-being, it won't work. And in that way, the pendulum will have swung too far to the vulnerability side of things, right? Because we call that a role reversal. Where then the child feels responsible for the young person, meaning they become your parent, right? And they start to fulfill a role subconsciously that I may have or that you may have wanted your parents to do but never did, right? That's the importance of doing your own therapeutic work, your own emotional work, your own transformative work, which I am still engaged in to this day. And I'm a living celibate monk in the world here in Japan, coming to you at 6 a.m. because I've got jet lag and felt like I needed to share something with you. So all that to be said, vulnerability is power. If you want to have more influence with your kids, consider being more transparent and vulnerable with them. Share with them the struggles that you have in your life, the struggle that it is that you have with them, maybe not knowing what to do and feeling powerless and not knowing what to say all the time and not knowing the right things to do as a parent, what a responsibility is. Again, and just dabble with this. right? Make yourself human, get onto their level. One of the things that you can actually try saying, that I'll say some version of this a lot whenever I'm working with a young person who doesn't really want to give me the time of day. I'll just say, listen, if I were in your shoes, this is what I would do. And I would kind of give some advice in that way. But it's advice that it's not like take my advice, I'm not using it anyway. It's like advice that I've applied to my life and that I practice, right? And so the same should be true for you. Give them advice or give them guidance, but make sure you're applying it to yourself, right? Young people are such good, they sniff out being hypocritical, right? Let's try how that worked there. But they sniff that out. So don't be a hypocrite. Apply anything that you ask them to do. Make sure you're practicing. You may not be great at it, but make sure you're practicing it for yourself. Yeah. So I'll say, here's what I would do. I mean, take my 2 cents. It's yours. And I always qualify it with like, I don't really know what your life is like. I don't really know. I've got to be honest. I'm 46. You're 16. I didn't have the internet when I was in college, My grandma, cordless phones came out when I was like 10 years old or something. My grandma didn't understand how it worked. She was like, there's no cord. I was like, I know, Grandma. It just works somehow, So anyway, all that to say, like, I often will say, like, listen, here's the 46-year-old version of what I would say. And then they kind of are like, yeah. I'm like, yeah, you'll say that your own way, right? And they're like, yes. So be humble enough to say and to know that you don't know what their experience is like. This generation, I mean, if you're my age or even 10 years younger or 10 years older, we don't know. We don't know what it's like to be on Snap and to be on Insta and to doom scroll your way into the night. I mean, come on, right? I mean, maybe you do if you do that now, right? But not as a young person who's struggling to find friendships and have a girlfriend or a boyfriend or romantic relationship, or they feel so inept at school, or there's all this social pressure. I mean, remember when we were kids, if we didn't get invited to a party, like maybe the kid who didn't invite us knew. Maybe some of the kids at the party knew. Maybe we knew. But now, if you don't get invited to a party, someone could just send like some mean snap or post on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, and the whole community knows, right? It's embarrassing. I mean, being bullied and bullying, I mean, they are brutal these days in ways that we can't really understand. The closest that we can get to understand is how we've felt humiliated and embarrassed in our lives. Right? This is another takeaway. Maybe one of the best ways to connect with your child is around how they might be feeling and how you might have felt similarly. And again, another thing that I'll sometimes pepper into as I'm talking or working with or just connecting with young people is like, I'll just say, listen, I can remember times when I have been mortally embarrassed, mortally meaning I felt like I was going to die. And how challenging that was to navigate. I mean, I just feel like I never wanted to see anybody again, And I'll qualify it with like, I don't know if that's what your experience is like, but that's sort of what I see and what you're going through right now. And it must be just terrible. Like it's never going to get better, right? You're not their therapist. I get that. And you can be someone who's human, who has flaws, who has vulnerabilities, who has weaknesses. Now, here's the thing, a final point here. You don't want to erode your boundaries for the sake of connecting with them. Don't give them what they want, right? So for example, you might say to them, they might be pissed because you're not letting them go out with their friends or use the car or whatever else, right? You know what I mean? You might say, tell me why this is so, makes you so angry or makes you not want to open up to me. And they'll be like, well, and they'll say something because they'll probably just continue trying to negotiate getting what they want. And say, well, it's because you did it. You if you just gave me that, then I wouldn't have to. God, it's so and just maybe practice reflecting or getting the world. So if I gave you this thing that you really wanted, then everything would be better, huh? Yeah, got it. I mean, I got to tell you, I'm not going to give you this thing. And I can understand how infuriating that is for you, right? Such a powerful statement to live within the boundary. Here's really the art of this and what it comes down to live within the boundary and to find and seek and make yourself available for connection within the boundary that you're holding. And if you can practice this over time, 80% of the time, you have to be perfect. Sometimes cave in, give them what they want, give them some ice cream, give them an extra $1, let them take the car out. It's not the end of the world. But the majority of the time, if you are practicing connecting within the boundary that you are adhering to, this is going to create a highly successful young person when they get into their adulthood, which is really what holding boundaries is about, is to inspire them to want to be more independent. Yeah. So anyway, leave a comment below if you have any. Give a thumbs up on this. Subscribe if you want to hear more about this. And I am really with you, and I have so much compassion with you. All my love from Japan, and all my best.